the nation of Israel.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Mr. Trump, we're going to come to you in a second, but wait, okay. I want to go to Hugh Hewitt, who has questions on this exact line of subject.
Mr. Trump, I want to follow up on the quote that Senator Cruz used. You said you would want to be, quote, sort of a neutral guy. He did mention Taylor Force. He was a West Point graduate. He was a war hero. He was a Vanderbilt graduate student. He was killed in a Palestinian terror attack near Tel Aviv. Many others were killed. And the Israeli government says the Palestinian Authority is inciting this. Do you still want to stay neutral when the Palestinian Authority is inciting these attacks?
First of all, there's nobody on this stage that's more pro-Israel than I am. Okay? There's nobody. I am pro-Israel. I was the Grand Marshal, not so long ago, of the Israeli Day Parade down Fifth Avenue. I've made massive contributions to Israel. I have I have tremendous love for Israel. I happen to have a son-in-law and a daughter that are Jewish, okay? And 2 grandchildren that are Jewish. But I will tell you, I think if we're going to ever negotiate a peace settlement, which every Israeli wants, and I've spoken to the toughest and the sharpest, they all want peace, I think it would be much more helpful. I'm a negotiator. If I go in, I'll say I'm pro-Israel, and I've told that to everybody and anybody that would listen. But I would like to at least have the other side think I'm somewhat neutral as to them so that we can maybe get a deal done. Maybe we can get a deal. I think it's probably the toughest negotiation of all time, but maybe we can get a deal done.
Senator
As far
Cruz,
as, and by the way, just so you understand, as far as Iran, I would have never made that deal. I think it's maybe the worst deal I've ever seen. I think it's the worst deal I've ever seen negotiated. I will be so tough on them, and ultimately that deal will be broken unless they behave better than they've ever behaved in their lives, which is probably unlikely.
Senator Cruz and Senator Rubio.
You know, we need a president who understands the national security interest of this country. The reason we are friends and allies with Israel is they are a liberal democratic country that share our values. They're our strongest ally in the region. We get billions in intelligence resources, billions in military resources. And the Palestinian Authority that Donald, along with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, say they want to treat neutrally the same as Israel. The Palestinian Authority is in a unity government with Hamas, a terrorist organization. They pay the families of these terrorists who murder people. And this is exactly the moral relativism Barack Obama has. And the answer is not scream all Muslims bad. Let me give you an example of a Muslim, for example, we ought to be standing with. President al-Sisi of Egypt, a president of a Muslim country who is targeting radical Islamic terrorists. He's hunting them down and stopping them. Our focus needs to be on keeping this country safe.
I want to go back to the Israeli government's assertion that the Palestinian Authority is inciting the convulsion of violence. Do you agree?
Well, that's undeniable. First of all, they've said they've encouraged people to do so. And you've seen the speeches of the Palestinian Authority president talking about how glorious this is that they're doing these sorts of things. But let me go back for a moment. The policy Donald has outlined, I don't know if he realizes, is an anti-Israeli policy. Maybe that's not your intent, but here's why it is an anti-Israeli policy. There is no peace deal possible with the Palestinians at this moment. There just isn't, because there's no one to negotiate with. The Palestinian Authority is not interested in a serious deal, and they are now in union with Hamas, an organization whose specific purpose is the destruction of the Jewish state. Every time that Israel has turned over territory of any kind, be it Gaza or now in Judea and Samaria, it is used as a launching pad to attack Israel. And that's what will happen again. These groups are not interested in a deal with Israel. What they are interested in is ultimately removing the Jewish state and occupying its entire territory. So maybe in 30 years the conditions will exist, but they do not exist now. And to have a president forcing the Israelis to the table is harmful to Israel and emboldens Israel's enemies.
Mr. Trump, a response, and we'll go to Governor Cook.
If I become president of the United States, one of the things that will be an absolute priority is, number one, protection of Israel, but also seeing if a deal can be made. The toughest deal, the toughest negotiation there probably is of any kind, no matter where you look, no matter how hard you look. But I would like to give it a shot. Very, very pro-Israel, nobody more pro-Israel, but I would love to give it a shot. And I have to tell you this, I have friends, Israelis, non-Israelis, people from New York City that happen to be Jewish and love Israel. And some are very tough people. Every single one of them, they know it's tough, but every single one of them wants to see if we could ever have peace in Israel. And some believe it's possible. It may not be, in which case we'll find out. But it would be a priority if I become president to see if I can do it.
Do you agree with the Israeli government that the Palestinian Authority is inciting this violence?
Well, there's no question. They were saying that the Israelis intended to go to the Dome of the Rock. I mean, when you think about this, thank goodness we worked with the Israelis to give them the Iron Dome. And, where they could protect themselves against all the missiles that were flying in. Could you imagine living in Miami here and have people shooting missiles in? Secondly, there was just an article the other day, Hugh, that I know you're familiar with, where the Israelis are learning to train underground in combat because the Palestinians now, Hamas in particular, is digging these tunnels trying to get under Israel. They're coming at them from above. They're trying to come at them from under the ground. And I just have to tell you this. I don't believe there is any long-term permanent peace solution, and I think pursuing that's the wrong thing to do. I believe that every day that we can have stability in that region by supporting the Israelis and making sure they have the weapons and the security that they need with our 100% backing is the way to proceed in the Middle East in regard to Israel.
Senator Cruz, I want to stay in the region. Just this week, the head of U.S. Central Command, General Lloyd Austin, essentially said it's going to take a lot more troops on the ground to end the ISIS threat in Syria and Iraq. In the beginning of this campaign, you have said you will follow the judgment of military commanders in the Pentagon. So here's a commander saying we need a lot more troops on the ground. Will you follow that advice and inject Americans again into what is, in essence, a metastasizing Sunni-Shia civil war?
We need to do whatever is necessary to utterly defeat ISIS. And that needs to be driven not by politicians, but by military expertise and judgment. Right now, we're not using a fraction of the tools that we have. We're not using our overwhelming air power. We're not arming the Kurds. Those need to be the first steps, and then we need to put whatever ground power is needed to carry it out. But, a question that actually Jake asked, and I'm glad to come back to it now, is rules of engagement. We have right now our troops engaged in combat, but President Obama has rules of engagement that are so strict that their arms are tied behind their back. They're not able to fight. They're not able to defend themselves. They're not able to kill the enemy. And I got to tell you, Hugh, I think that is wrong. It is immoral. And I give my word to every soldier, sailor, and airman and Marine, and to every wife and husband, every son and daughter, every mother and father, that will end in January 2017.
Governor Kasich, if it takes 20 or 30,000, if the Pentagon says that's what needs to be done, will you follow their advice?
I've said all along and laid out my foreign policy. I'm going to remind everybody that 55% of the foreign policy experts in this country said I was the best to be commander-in-chief. I spent 18 years on the Defense Committee, Armed Services, and then I was in the Pentagon with Donald Rumsfeld after 9/11, in and out for a couple years. We absolutely have to win this with a coalition. The Arabs have to be with us. The Europeans have to understand that this threat is closer to them than even is as close as it is to us. And in addition to that, you have to be in the air and you have to be on the ground. And you bring all the force you need. It's got to be shock and awe in the military speak. Then once it gets done, and we will wipe them out, once it gets done, it settles down, we come home and let the regional powers redraw the map if that's what it takes.
Mr. Trump, more troops?
We really have no choice. We have to knock out ISIS. We have to knock the hell out of them. We have to get rid of it, and then we have to come back here and rebuild our country, which is falling apart.
How many are we
have no
speaking
choice.
about?
I would listen to the generals, but I'm hearing numbers of 20 to 30,000. We have to knock them out fast. Look, we're not allowed to fight. We can't fight. We're not knocking out the oil because they don't want to create environmental pollution up in the air. I mean, these are things that nobody even believes. They think we're kidding. They didn't want to knock out the oil because of what it's going to do to the carbon footprint. We don't fight like we used to fight. We used to fight to win. Now we fight for no reason whatsoever. We don't even know what we're doing. So the answer is we have to knock them out. We have to knock them out fast, and we have to get back home, and we have to rebuild our country, which is falling